Most people think Rome fell because of barbarians at the gate. They're wrong. Rome fell because it became too expensive to exist. For 2 centuries, being a Roman citizen was a cheat code for wealth, subsidized by endless expansion and a currency that the world had no choice but to trust. Today, we're living through the exact same sequence. If you feel like your salary is buying less, your debt is getting heavier, and the system is flickering, it's not just inflation. It's the final stage of a 2,000-year-old economic pattern. America hasn't just peaked, it has entered the fiscal limit. In 211 AD, Emperor Caracalla did something desperate. To pay for a bloated military and bread and circuses for the masses, he reduced the silver content in the Roman denarius. He didn't tell the people, he just diluted the value. Sound familiar? Since 1971, the US dollar has lost 96% of its purchasing power. But the real collapse isn't a slow fade, it's a phased transition. We are moving from a world where the dollar was a risk-free asset to one where it is a return-free risk. For working professionals, this isn't a history lesson. It's an urgent warning that the safe financial path you were taught in college is now the most dangerous one you can take. In this video, we are analyzing the 3 specific mirrors between Rome's final century and America's next decade. 1. The overproduction of elites. Why a surplus of degree holders with no power leads to internal collapse. 2. The military interest trap. When it becomes mathematically impossible to fund both the empire abroad and the social contract at home. 3. The loss of the reserve. What happens to the world when it decides it no longer wants to subsidize your lifestyle? In the late Roman Empire, the bureaucracy didn't just grow, it metastasized. To maintain control, the state created thousands of new administrative roles. Suddenly, every wealthy family's son was entitled to a high-ranking position in the government. But there was a mathematical problem. The number of elite positions was fixed, while the number of people qualified for those positions was exploding. Peter Tuchin, a complexity scientist, calls this elite overproduction. It is the single most reliable predictor of an empire's internal collapse. Today, we see the exact same pattern. We've told an entire generation that a master's degree is the minimum for a middle-class life. In 1970, only 10% of Americans had a 4-year degree. Today, that number is nearly 40%. We have produced a surplus of elites, people with high intelligence, high debt, and high expectations, but the economy has run out of high-status roles to house them. When you have 1 million qualified people fighting for 10,000 influence roles, the result isn't competition, it's instability. When an empire can no longer provide for its educated class, those people don't just disappear, they become counter-elites. In Rome, these were the frustrated aristocrats who eventually funded the very rebellions that burned the city. In the 21st century, these are the professionals who did everything right, the lawyers, the analysts, the engineers, who now find themselves priced out of the housing market by the very system they serve. This is the internal friction stage. The empire stops fighting external enemies because it's too busy trying to keep its own educated class from burning the social contract. If you are a working professional today, you are likely a victim of this overproduction. You are competing in a saturated market where your elite credentials are being devalued by the hour. But here is the Roman lesson. The collapse of the elite path is actually an opportunity for the parallel path. As the traditional hierarchy breaks under the weight of its own bureaucracy, power shifts toward those who can operate outside the system. While the overproduced elites fight for a seat at a table that's already breaking, the wealth of the next decade will be built by those who stop asking for permission to lead. Every empire falls into the same trap. It grows so large that the cost of defending its borders eventually exceeds the economic value of owning them. In the 4th century, Rome faced a terrifying reality. They had 5,000 miles of frontier to guard. To do it, they had to double the size of the army.
But to pay that army, they had to tax the very farmers who produced the food. When the farmers couldn't pay, they abandoned their land. The result? A larger army defending a shrinking economy. This is the moment an empire begins to eat itself. Today, America is hitting its own Roman wall, but with a modern twist: interest on debt. For 80 years, the US has maintained the global commons, the shipping lanes, the GPS satellites, the petrodollar. This is the ultimate invisible subsidy for working professionals in developed economies. It makes your Amazon deliveries cheap and your software exports dominant. But as of 2024, a structural shift occurred that hasn't happened since the British Empire collapsed after World War II. The cost of paying interest on the national debt has officially surpassed the entire defense budget. Why does this matter to people trying to build a stable life? Because it creates a liquidity vacuum. When interest payments explode, the government has only three choices: tax more, spend less, or print more. Taxing more kills the exit velocity of the working professional. Spending less, austerity, causes social unrest among the overproduced elites we discussed earlier. Printing more, debasement, destroys the purchasing power of your savings. In Rome, they called it the crisis of the 3rd century. They stopped using silver and started using copper washed in silver. Today we call it quantitative easing. Different names, same math. When the cost of the past becomes higher than the investment in the future, innovation, or infrastructure, the empire is no longer a business, it's a liquidation sale. The final stage of the trap is the loss of the monopoly on force. An empire's currency is only as strong as its ability to enforce its use. Rome's aureus was the world's reserve because the legions were everywhere. The US dollar is the world's reserve because the US Navy is everywhere. But when the interest trap forces a choice, do we pay the interest to China and Japan, or do we fund the 7th Fleet? The choice is already made for you. As the military footprint shrinks to save the budget, the trust in the currency evaporates. This isn't a theory, it's the Gresham's law of geopolitics. Bad money and weak empires always get pushed out by the new, harder alternative. You were told to buy and hold for 30 years. You were told that the S&P 500 is a safe harbor. But that advice assumes a 30-year continuation of the Pax Americana. What if the math says that era ended last Tuesday? If you are a member of the asset-seeking class in a legacy superpower, you aren't just watching a history documentary. You are watching the expiration date of your current financial strategy. For 80 years, the United States has enjoyed what the French called l'exorbitant privilège. Because the dollar is the global reserve, America can export its inflation to the rest of the world. When the Fed prints money, a plumber in Berlin or a tech lead in Bangalore pays for it through the devaluation of their own purchasing power. In Rome, this privilege was the denarius. It was the only coin accepted from Londinium to Egypt. As long as the world had to use it to trade, Rome could tax the entire known world without ever sending a tax collector. But privilege creates resentment, and resentment eventually creates a parallel system. Every empire makes the same fatal mistake. They use their currency as a weapon. When the Romans started seizing the assets of disloyal provinces, the provinces stopped sending grain. They started bartering or using local gold. In the modern context, the turning point wasn't a market crash, it was a software lockout. When the West froze Russia's FX reserves and cut them off from SWIFT in 2022, the neutrality of the dollar died. Every CFO and central banker in the developed nation and beyond watched that happen and realized if my reserves can be turned off like a light switch, they aren't reserves, they're a liability. We are currently witnessing the construction of a parallel financial architecture. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a structural necessity for the East. Commodity-backed trade. Unlike the dollar, which is backed by full faith and credit, or debt, the new BRICS Plus alignment is focused on backing trade with physical reality: oil, gold, and rare earth minerals. The digital ledger shift. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, aren't just for surveillance, they are designed to bypass the US banking system entirely. If China can buy Saudi oil using a direct digital bridge, the petrodollar, the very thing that keeps your lifestyle subsidized, simply vanishes. Here is the technical trap you need to understand: the Triffin dilemma. To be the world's reserve currency, you must run massive trade deficits. You have to flood the world with your money so they can trade with each other. But eventually, the world has more of your money than you have the ability to pay back. We have reached that point. There are now more eurodollars and offshore liabilities than there is gold or even total US GDP to back them. When the confidence drops below the debt, the exit isn't a slow walk, it's a bank run on a global scale. For working professionals, this is the end game. Most investment advice, index funds, 60/40 portfolios, is based on the unipolar world. It assumes the dollar will always be the cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry. But as the reserve status slips, we enter a period of high volatility and fragmented markets. Your safe assets in a declining empire are actually the highest risk. In Rome, the wealthy fled the cities to latifundia, self-sufficient estates. In 2026, the wealthy are fleeing into decentralized assets, hard commodities, and jurisdictional arbitrage. They are preparing for a world where the dollar is just another local currency, like the lira or the peso. If the dollar lost 30% of its global utility by next Tuesday, would your career survive the weekend? History shows us that when an empire's currency and bureaucracy fail, wealth doesn't simply vanish, it relocates. In the 5th century, the smart money moved from the Roman Senate to the trade guilds of the East. In the 1940s, it moved from the British pound to the American industrial machine. We are entering the Great Relocation. For the 20 to 40-year-old professional, the default path, working for a legacy corporation, saving in a devaluing currency, and relying on a state pension, is now the highest risk strategy in existence. The system is no longer designed to build your wealth, it is designed to maintain its own survival. To thrive in a multipolar world, you must adopt the mindset of a sovereign professional. This requires 3 specific shifts in your personal strategy. Pillar 1. Jurisdictional arbitrage. Stop thinking like a citizen of one country and start thinking like a global entity. Where is your capital stored? Where is your tax residency? If the fiscal trap we discussed in point 2 closes in your home country, do you have a digital exit? Pillar 2. Hard asset allocation. In an era of currency weaponization and interest traps, paper promises are secondary to physical reality. This includes commodities, energy exposure, and decentralized protocols that cannot be turned off by a central bank. Pillar 3. The specialized skill set. The overproduction of elites means generic degrees are worthless. The future belongs to those with uncancelable skills. Highly technical expertise in energy, food systems, security, or global trade. Be the person who knows how the machine works, not the one who just operates the buttons. Rome didn't fall in a day. It was a slow, agonizing decline made of 1,000 small, bad decisions. But for the individuals living through it, there was always a choice: to sink with the old system or to build the foundation for the next one. The American empire is hitting its mathematical limits. The cheap credit is gone, the elite path is crowded, and the reserve status is under siege. But for those who can see the big cycle for what it is, this isn't the end of the world. It is the beginning of the most significant wealth transfer in human history. The question isn't whether the system will change. The math has already decided that. The question is, when the invisible subsidy of the last 40 years finally evaporates, what will you have left? If you found this analysis valuable, you need to join our community. The era of the passive investor is over. The era of the strategic professional has begun.